Well, welcome everyone. I have 12 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started so that we have enough time for Shantanu to present today, which we are very excited about. My name is Amy Petz, and I am the Executive Secretary of the Friends of Alexander M. Bracken Library. And on behalf of our friends and my colleagues at the libraries, I'm really excited to welcome you to this year's annual Lunch and Learn series with a focus on faculty, teaching, and research. At the core of our mission as an academic library is the advancement of knowledge, supporting the vibrant interdisciplinary dialogues that thrive on our campus. These dialogues are often sparked by the innovative approaches to pedagogy and research that we are celebrating here today. Through this series, we proudly highlight the invaluable contributions of our Ball State faculty. Their work not only enriches the academic experience of our students, but also enhances the intellectual vitality of our broader community. The libraries are deeply committed to fostering and advancing such exemplary efforts, and we are honored to support these endeavors through our collections and our services. So thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to the insights and discussions that will emerge from this year's series. I'll now turn it over to Nick for more specific about information about today's event. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, so really quick, as a heads up, these meetings are recorded. You should have been warned when you joined the meeting, but these are all uploaded to the University Library's YouTube channel. So if you want to view them in the future or share them with someone who couldn't make it to the event, they're there for those purposes. But specifically about today's event, our guest is Shantanu Suman. He is an art director and graphic designer from India, currently serving as an associate professor of graphic design here at Ball State University. In 2016, Shantanu founded Studio 165 Plus, a design seminar course that offers students a dynamic academic experience with a strong emphasis on real-world applications of graphic design. Studio 165 Plus fosters collaboration between students and community members, enabling the development of creative projects that impact the local, regional, and national communities. Now in its 8th year, Studio 165 Plus has successfully completed over 120 projects and earned 50 design awards of both national and regional significance. So I will hand things over to Shantanu to hear about his work with Studio 165 Plus.
Hi, everyone. Just checking that you all can hear me, correct? Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Amy, and thank you, Nick, for inviting me to talk about Studio 165 today. Honestly, I can talk about this studio any day, every day, 24/7. So thank you. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time out to attend this presentation and hear me talk about our community and the work that we are fortunate to do with our community members. So my name is Shantanu Suman, and I'm an associate professor of graphic design in the School of Art. And as I already said, today I have the privilege of talking about Studio 165 and our collaboration with the community members. As Nick already mentioned, we've been engaged in over 120 projects since the beginning, or since founding of Studio 165, which was in spring 2017. But my focus today is of this presentation is one of our flagship regional projects, I would say, which was done in collaboration. Which, well, it's a continuing. So it started in 2019, and it's still going on strong in different forms. It's in collaboration with Muncie Action Plan and various neighborhoods in Muncie. So I'm going to start sharing my screen so that you can look at the. Okay. So the presentation is about the importance of graphic design and marketing for revitalization of Muncie neighborhoods. So in fall 2018, I received an email from Heather Williams. She's the Associate Director of Ball State Office of Community Engagement and Program Manager at Building Better Neighborhoods, and also the Task Force 3 Chair for Muncie Action Plan. So basically, like, I mean, as some of you may already know, Heather is like one of those superhumans who's like needed in every small community because she brings people together and gets things done. And one of the first projects that, and actually, like literally the first project that Heather and I we worked, and when I say I, as in like obviously Studio 165, we worked together on was the redesigning, or in this case, I would say designing the BBN identity design. As you can see on the left-hand side, they still use this image, which is, you know, like a combination of all the neighborhoods in Muncie, but it, as a graphic designer, I would say that this doesn't work as a logo. So our first task was obviously to create a logo that is easily identifiable, resizable, and can be used as something that could be used to represent Building Better Neighborhoods, the organization. So this is what we did. And then when we started talking about the projects, one of the first things that we talked about was how extensively we will be involved with the neighborhoods, along with Heather. And her effort were aimed to establishing Building Better Neighborhoods as an important organization that connects Ball State resources with local neighborhood associations. And we identified several ways in which this collaboration could benefit both Studio 165 as well as Muncie Action Plan, along with the city of Muncie and the different neighborhoods. So it was our commitment to invest in the city and fostering a sense of civic responsibility. These were also opportunities for students to dive into the unique histories and aspirations of individual neighborhoods, and then enabling the student engagement in this multi-year project with sustained impact, also partnering with non-traditional design clients. And I'm saying non-traditional because for anyone in the design industry, when we think about clients, most of the time we are thinking about like an organization or a for-profit organization, non-profit organization. Neighborhoods is something that doesn't come to mind easily for most people, and especially for students who are starting their career looking at all the, you know, glamorous world of advertising and graphic design, but they don't consider like the neighborhoods that they live in as like a potential client or a collaboration. So that was definitely new. And then it was also important for us to address from when I joined Ball State University, ever since I had about the town and gown divide, and I know that this is nothing new for Muncie. And a lot of people are putting in a lot of time and effort to bridge this gap, and we have been successful, but there was still like a little bit of like this disconnect. And so this project also helped a little bit with that. And then access, the other important thing was like we had access to an immersive learning grant for purchasing some of the necessary materials such as like cameras and hard drives and some of the other printing equipments that we needed. In terms of our design deliverables, we decided to create visual identities. So far, since the start of this project, since 2018, we have worked with 14 Muncie neighborhoods. And if I'm right, like I think there are over 40 different neighborhoods in Muncie. So far we have worked with, we have completed working with 14 neighborhoods, their visual identities. This semester we are working with 2 more, so that'll make it 16. We have also completed multiple neighborhood street signs. Depending on which neighborhood you live in, you may or may not have some of the street signs that were designed by students from Studio 165. We have created informational brochures for the neighborhoods. We have created promotional merchandise, including some yard signs and t-shirt designs and etc. We have also created some social media campaigns to promote funding that was available through the ARP, which is American Rescue Plan funds. And then in the end, we developed a brochure that explained the ARP process and the entire timeline. So the audience for this work, it included like the current residents, prospective visitors to any of these neighborhoods, home buyers, small businesses, small or big businesses that were within these neighborhoods, that ultimately contributed to the overall economic, social, and cultural objectives of the revitalization efforts within each of these neighborhoods. And it is also important to note that even though each neighborhood has a very distinct visual identity, our plan was also to develop marketing materials that shared a similar aesthetic while catering to the unique characteristics of each of these neighborhoods. So just to give you a basic idea of the identity design process, here are the first 3 steps involved in that process for each neighborhood. We start by collecting information about the neighborhood's distinct attributes through either a questionnaire or an in-person meeting, or both. Actually, in a lot of cases, we start with a questionnaire, we go through the questionnaire, and then we reach out to the neighborhood to have an in-person meeting, or also visit the neighborhood and walk through the neighborhood. Research is obviously an integral part to identify the challenges and opportunities specific to each of these neighborhoods. Research is something that, this is something that I tell my students that it's involved at every step of, it's not just initial research just to find out about the neighborhoods, but we also look at neighborhoods across the country with similar demographics, but also looking at design trends that exist in our industry. So there's research involved at every step, and then establishing an estimated timeline for the design process, which is obviously done in consultation with the neighborhood committees. And the timeline, I would say that depending on how, because each neighborhood committee is different. Some neighborhood committees are already established. They are members who are very eager to work, and whereas there are some neighborhood committees that are forming or started forming as we were working through this project. And so the timeline could differ. On an average, an identity design project could take anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks, but we've also worked on identity design projects that have spanned across a couple of semesters because the committees were unable to commit their time or meet with us, and the back and forth with respect to the design concepts, it took a little longer than we anticipated. Here are some of the photographs that when we go through the neighborhoods, this is what typically it looks like. We walk with a representative or multiple representatives across the neighborhoods just to understand what the architecture looks like, what the amenities are. And so here are the next 5 steps that are involved in the design process. Students basically, when we come back, we start brainstorming. That includes mind maps, again, more research, generating multiple concepts, reflecting the neighborhood's identity, using the profile that we have developed as a guide. And then there's presentation of the design options to the neighborhood committee members. There's several, depending on if we are able to hit the mark sooner. In some cases, we are able to deliver what is desired in the first round. In some cases, we need at least a couple rounds of revisions. So there could be some feedback and input process back and forth. Obviously, incorporating the feedback and refining and finalizing the design options, and then ultimately creating an artwork file. And this is something that obviously is very important when I say important for artwork files, because a lot of times neighborhood committees might operate more on social media, for example, social media, Facebook or Instagram, or depending on what kind of social media channels they use. But for us, we want to, when we are talking as identity design, we want to be prepared that this identity, even though the neighborhood might not have thought about it, they could potentially use this for print-based work, for digital applications. So when we are creating these artworks, we want to deliver the files like that we are thinking a little bit about the future as well. And this has helped us because like when we started working with neighborhoods in 2018 and 19, little did we realize that like we will be going back to the same neighborhoods and working with them on other promotional materials and marketing materials and projects. So it eventually helped us to have some of this plan in place. So here are some examples of what the process could look like. This is more internal sketching and coming up with ideas. This was for Minitrista. The one on the iPad, that's the final one, but we obviously developed like other options to present. A little bit of like the breakdown of what the process or when we are presenting the identity design. So for example, in this one, you can very easily like see how, like, I mean, even though it looks like a very simple heron, but there are other hidden meanings. And again, for each neighborhood, it could look a little different. So there's obviously the heron, which the neighborhood committee wanted to include, but also the White River was prominent. So we decided to include that as well. And then this is something interesting that I should tell you about, like neighborhoods, and especially in Muncie. I'm yet to meet a neighborhood in Muncie that is not proud of how many trees they have. And also, I haven't met a neighborhood yet who don't emphasize how close they are to campus. Like, I mean, it's a good thing that like it's a small place and we can literally drive from one part of Muncie to another, like one end of Muncie to another in like 10 to 12 minutes. So everyone wants to say that, oh yeah, we are very close to campus, and it's great. But our challenge is when we are meeting with the neighborhood committees, just to find out like more distinct attributes that could distinguish each of these neighborhoods from the other neighborhoods. So anyways, and then we go into like creating these different options that could be used. So when it comes to identity design, we obviously have to think about that it could be used in a horizontal format, a vertical format, and a circular or a square format, especially for social media. So we break it down into primary, secondary lockups. And then we are obviously thinking about the color palette. So in general, like we can very easily work with like just CMYK that is used for print-based applications, and then either RGB or hex. Hex is mostly used for web applications. RGB is digital. So we provide all of this information. And one more thing that we do when we are working with neighborhoods is that we create something called a style guide or an identity standards manual that includes all of this information. And this is something that, like, I mean, it's just basically a mock-up, but it basically shows the neighborhood how the identity can further be used if they wanted to use it. None of this is actual final produced material, but this is just for our sake. When we do presentations, we want to give an idea of like how these different identity designs can be used. Obviously, the neighborhood can decide to include more information if needed, along with the identity design. And these signs actually exist in the different neighborhoods. So you might have, again, like not every neighborhood has a sign. As I said, we have worked with 14 neighborhoods, but again, like I think the city and Muncie Action Plan, they work together to decide which neighborhood can get a sign. And then, we don't get to decide which neighborhood gets a sign. We just are responsible for designing the identity, and then it gets applied to the signage within the neighborhood. One more thing that I want to say is that, like, I mean, obviously, as we are working with the neighborhoods, Muncie Action Plan, as a community partner, they are responsible for selecting the neighborhoods that we collaborate with. They, in case of if there are any delays, the Muncie Action Plan team is responsible for addressing any of those delays or gathering information or receiving feedback when the neighborhoods, in some cases, if they become non-responsive. And also after the identity is developed, they work with the neighborhood committees to develop the marketing materials and some of the neighborhood signs. So here's an example of the forest park. We work with them. So just a little breakdown of what as I said, like, I mean, everyone loves their trees and the nature. So we have to find out like creative ways in which it can be represented without making every neighborhood look the same. Here's Haltman. More application, McKinley. Their signage. West Prior was, I think, one of the first neighborhoods, first few neighborhoods that we worked with. South Side, they have their school, so they wanted to include the silhouette of the school in the neighborhood identity. Signage. Morningside. And for me, I love this project because I moved to Muncie in 2016, and I still keep finding out about new neighborhoods. I don't know how many of you know the names of more than 15 or 20 neighborhoods in Muncie. Maybe some of you do, but for most of us who are working at the university and are not from Muncie, sometimes we get involved. Like, I mean, we are so we are so busy with our own lives that it's difficult to find out about like the city that we live in. And this project has provided me with the opportunity to find out so much more about Muncie and its history and the different neighborhoods, and meet with the people, the folks. And similarly for our students, they live in some of these neighborhoods, especially Riverside, Novel City, which is literally like, I mean, next to campus. And sometimes students, they find out about their neighborhood that gives them the sense of pride, and they are able to be more involved in future. Old West End. Another thing about the neighborhoods that I can say is different neighborhoods have different attributes, and some of the neighborhoods, for example, Old West End has a lot of like, I mean, architecture that they are really proud of. So we have to find a balance between like what, I mean, obviously we tried pitch different ideas, but ultimately it's the neighborhood's decision what they want to represent, or how they want to represent their neighborhood. So in case of Old West End, it is something that like we found it a little tricky because some of these houses, even though they are very beautiful houses, might not be in the best condition currently. So to represent a neighborhood through houses can be a bit challenging, especially when we are thinking about the longevity of the identity. But as I said, like, I mean, we work with the neighborhood committees, and ultimately we try to find the solution that is good for the students for their learning process, but also does what the neighborhood wants, or like how they want to represent themselves. It's a happy middle ground, hopefully. Whiteley, industry. And this is, I think, one of our latest neighborhoods, Storer Wood. So it's like, I mean, I recently saw through the City of Muncie page that they have finally installed the neighborhood playground is ready to use. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Storer Woods. But this is also a neighborhood that was very interesting, because when we started working with this neighborhood, it was actually a combination. It is a combination of 3 different neighborhoods that each had distinct names. So they had to come together, form a committee, and then apply for a grant. And then the city, right now, they have a very beautiful park in the middle of the neighborhood. So it's a developing neighborhood. Can more. And so here are some of the other, say, social media applications or merchandise that the neighborhoods, they use these identities to include in their promotional materials. And then the next phase of this project, well, I don't know if I can actually call it a next phase, but once we finish the identity design part, then the next phase technically for each of these neighborhoods was to work on their welcome brochure. And there are different steps that were involved in the development of this promotional brochure. We conducted a very thorough research to identify obviously the challenges and opportunities based on factors such as geographical demographics and all the available resources. We collaborated with the Muncie Action Plan and the neighborhood committees to curate a list of attributes that required promotion or inclusion in the marketing materials. Obviously, then we created layouts for the brochures to include in the to include the amenities, and then we presented the options to the community, the committees, and for their feedback and input, and then we incorporated the feedback to refine the design and content in the final. So, for example, for Riverside neighborhood, Riverside Normal City neighborhood, as you can see, there's like a map in the back that kind of look with locations about like the nearby amenities. There's a history of the neighborhood, a little bit of information about the architecture, different amenities, fun facts, information about the neighborhood association. Here you can see about Old West End. There's a little section about how to be a good neighbor, then contact information of other emergency services, trash pickup, things like that. And a lot of these promotional materials and brochures were created for people who were either, so these are available through the neighborhood committees. Hopefully they still have it. Well, it is definitely available on the Muncie Neighborhoods website to download as a PDF. But I think Muncie Neighborhood also has some copies. So, for example, prospective faculty, staff who are coming to work at Ball State, if they're interested in any of these neighborhoods, this could be a starting point. But also prospective home buyers in each of these neighborhoods, they can find out about like a little bit about the history of the neighborhood through some of these brochures. Is about Minute Vista Central neighborhood. Outside. So again, this was another fun way of for us through in Studio 165 to learn about like all of these different neighborhoods and the different amenities they have. But it's also, in some cases, it can be as I said, some neighborhood committees are more responsive than others. So they have their things in place. They are able to respond back quicker, whereas there were other neighborhoods that had to get together and they had to actually think about what all amenities do they want to highlight. How do they present, like, because it's, like they are not writing a book here. So even though they want to write about the culture, they have just like 2 or 3 sentences in which they have to highlight like what the culture stands for, what the neighborhood is all about. So it's easy to write a lot of content, but it's more challenging to narrow it down. So that was a big challenge for them. And then came COVID, unfortunately. So while we were working on this project, obviously during the pandemic, it became very challenging to visit the neighborhoods in person. Obviously, we tried adapting quickly. And because we had been working on this project for a couple of years, our students were able to adapt and have some online meetings, but it wasn't the same as like going and visiting the neighborhood and meeting with the committees in person. So that was the bigger challenge. So in March 2021, President Joe Biden, he signed the American Rescue Plan into law, and that provided $350 billion in direct aid to state and city governments that were grappling with tax revenue shortfalls due to business lockdowns during the pandemic. So recognizing the impact of the pandemic on Muncie, the mayor and the city council, they worked swiftly and they allocated a portion of the ARP funding to the 5 sectors that were affected by the crisis. So as you can see here, there's small business and tourism, hotels, restaurants, nonprofits, and then some to the neighborhoods. So the city of Muncie, they approached Muncie Action Plan to serve as the 501c3 nonprofit partner responsible for overseeing the neighborhood ARP fund allocations. So with the city allocating $1 million to combat the effects of COVID-19, the Muncie Action Plan, they convened a committee comprising of city officials and neighborhood association leaders to develop a timeline to establish the eligibility requirements and define the funding process. So because we had a working history with Muncie Action Plan, they again reached out to us to develop a campaign to promote the application process for the ARP funds. And these funds, again, as you can see, they range from $20,000 to $100,000 for neighborhoods, and they have enabled neighborhoods to undertake significant projects that have enhanced the residents, their quality of life within the neighborhood. So when we were thinking about this campaign from other projects that we had worked on, it was important for us to emphasize the non-linear nature of the process and planning that was involved here. There were a lot of variable factors that impacted our timeline, and we had to sometimes work very quickly or slow down the process based on the timeline of the neighborhood associations or the city officials. So the city of Muncie, as I said earlier, it has over 40 plus neighborhoods, and one of the bigger challenges was obviously there's a lack of organization, and in some neighborhoods, if they are not established. So upon discovering the accessibility of the ARP funds, a few of these organized neighborhoods, they acted very quickly, swiftly, to fill up these forms and to apply for the funds. Whereas with some other neighborhoods, they decided to form a neighborhood in order to apply for this funding. So this is a social media campaign that we were developing, or we actually created. So we used all of this to our advantage. We developed this campaign that was aimed at showcasing the existing or exciting initiatives that few of these, not existing, but exciting initiatives that the neighborhoods, the existing neighborhoods had, committees had thought of, that they wanted to use for their allocated funds. The campaign was titled Celebrate the Unknown, to get the residents excited about the various neighborhood revitalization possibilities using the ARP funds. And because of the realities of living through the pandemic, the existing neighborhood was shown as a black and white image, and the design team then created illustrations using a highlighter to show that the neighborhood could look into the bright future ahead. The primary objective was obviously to inspire and motivate our neighborhoods to take part in the application process and organize their own projects. Through this social media, we intended to encourage the neighborhoods to visit the Muncie Neighborhoods ARP webpage, where they could find more comprehensive information about the application process and submit their application before the due date. So the web page, it obviously served as a central hub. It offered essential details about policies, procedures, eligibility criteria, necessary forms, timelines, and all of the other information that were needed by the neighborhood committees. And then some of it was also because each neighborhood, like people consume information differently. So because of the diverse demographic composition of each of these neighborhoods and their preferences, then Muncie Action Plan, they used multiple communication channels to disseminate some of this information about the ARP funding. So the information channels included social media, the website. Obviously, the website had the information. There were obviously some phone calls, emails, newsletters, also like personally reaching out to people through SMS, word of mouth, printed brochures, community meetings, or like literally going into the neighborhood committee meetings and doing a presentation about this. So, as you can see here, this is like one of the a photograph from one of those meetings. And then while our social media graphics, they were adaptable for the newsletters, we also recognized the preference for having a physical copy of information that could have been used by individuals within the community. So in fall 2022, we designed and produced this brochure specifically for distribution during the community meetings and also for conference presentations. The brochure contained all the relevant details about the ARP application process that was available on the webpage, catering to those who preferred having like a tangible and a physical resource. So here are some of the details from that brochure. And as you can see, like obviously the brochure has all the important information, but we were also, in terms of like the illustration style, we were still trying to reference back to the social media campaign, using the highlighter and trying to connect the dots from the campaign to the brochure as well. So as you can see here, I mean, obviously I'm happy to share that like a lot of neighborhoods have successfully secured funding through the ARP program and are actively engaged in revitalizing their communities. Muncie Action Plan has collaborated with these neighborhoods to document the utilization of the ARP funds for their revitalization initiatives. And this information, by the way, is available on the Muncie Action Plan website. And then in fall of 2023, we collaborated again with Muncie Action Plan to develop a social media campaign to celebrate and showcase some of the remarkable efforts made by these neighborhoods for their revitalization efforts. So the campaign obviously serves as to share the outcome of the revitalization project, but also hopefully inspire other neighborhoods and promote like a positive transformation taking place within the communities. So while there was a lack of budget and varying levels of motivation amongst residents that posed challenges, the campaign success was measured in terms of the neighborhood engagement and the fact that 25 out of the 40 plus neighborhoods have already been approved of the funding. That for us indicated that a significant level of the campaign and all the work that we were doing was generating a significant level of responsiveness and interest. And then I talk to Heather constantly, and one of the things that Heather also mentioned that since they started this process, at least two, and this is again like a conversation that I had about the ARP brochure last semester. So maybe there are more neighborhoods, but at least two more new neighborhood associations were formed. Two associations that were dormant came back, and they decided to start working together. And three more neighborhoods were interested and investigating in the possibilities of working together and applying for the ARP funds. Look at that, 40 minutes. Thank you so much for hearing me talk about our project with the Muncie Action Plan and with the Muncie neighborhoods. Yeah, I'm available if you have any questions for me.
Thank you so much, Shantanu, for such a great presentation and for some really powerful work in our community and with our students. My background is actually in sociology, and I did a lot of my research on neighborhood poverty. And there's a lot of theories out there that, focus on how not having a collective identity in a community can lead to, increased crime and people not necessarily wanting to invest in the infrastructure in their community and such as much. And I'm wondering if at least even anecdotally, you have any stories that maybe Heather has shared about how the provision of a shared identity or work towards a shared identity, perhaps like enriched communities.
Definitely. I'm not going to get into the details or take any names for neighborhood associations, but while we were visiting some of the neighborhoods, we were talking to residents and they talked about how, not so much in details about like crime, but like they were talking about how an identity was important for the youth to be engaged and to feel like a sense of like identity or connection. And obviously different neighborhoods had different ideas about like how they were going to use the identity. But the fact that like, I mean, a lot of people felt the need to have this identity to represent their neighborhoods. Like there were at least a few neighborhoods that talked about how they needed this to bring the people together. In some cases, people obviously shared the personal stories or stories about the neighborhoods, but like how their people haven't been together and there have been like either because of the lack of ownership or people not like ownership or generations had been living in the same neighborhood, but like the youth were feeling disconnected. And having this identity was basically a starting point where they started thinking about forming a committee and then having more neighborhood events and bringing people together. So, I mean, I don't want to say that like graphic design helped or saved the neighborhood, but hopefully it was a small part of that process.
I think Alan's got a question. Alan, you might have to unmute.
Yes, first of all, I want to commend you on the graphic design. All the designs were easy to interpret, they were colorful, they were moving, and whoever was involved in that almost across the board deserves, I think, a great deal of credit. And secondly, I want to commend Ball State for getting involved in the neighborhood like this. In the city. So often universities are entities unto themselves. And you created something here that it was an outstanding outreach to the community and ties the university with the community, with the school project, etc. And mentioning the school project, did you consider involving the Teachers College to design some curriculum guides whereby these pamphlets and goals of the neighborhood might be incorporated in the schools?
No, I didn't even realize that was a possibility, but now that you're mentioning, I would definitely look into that. I probably need to reach out to
you have so many things in the brochures. You give that to a class of students and they could design wonderful curriculum guides for each neighborhood as project for the class.
That is an amazing suggestion. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for mentioning that. Definitely, that yeah, I'll work on it soon. Yeah.
And I
Thank you.
had just one other comment. Did you consider the effect of large graphic arts on the buildings themselves to enhance the neighborhood? You know, the power of the large poster-like graphic designs on the sides of buildings. That's been very effective in many, many cities in incorporating neighborhood identification.
I agree. And I think from what I understand, you might also be referring to murals. And thankfully, in the last few years, I have seen a lot of neighborhoods invest in murals. I mean, obviously, the downtown mural that we all know of, but like there are several murals in the South Side that just help the neighborhoods enormously.
The Shepherd Ferry type murals.
Yeah, exactly. So no, that like I would love to be involved in that, but I also know that like a lot of my colleagues and friends in arts are already doing that. So yeah, I mean, Muncie Arts has been involved in some of these projects. People who have represented Muncie Arts have personally been involved in some of the projects that I know of. So definitely. And one more thing, while you were mentioning about the class, I would say this. I will give a lot of credit to the immersive learning program at Ball State University. When I joined here, obviously, like this project started as an immersive learning class, but also the class, like I mean, after a year, we realized that like we wanted to continue working with different neighborhoods, but our timeline didn't like, I mean, we didn't have a very structured plan of like how this would work over the years. So even though we were able to achieve what we had started for that first year, we continued working on this project without calling it an immersive learning. I mean, it's still an immersive learning experience because the students are going on and working with community partners. But while I'm talking about immersive learning, something else that I was also realizing that was like a certain shortcoming, I would say, with some of the immersive learning projects that I have been involved in is a lot of times I shouldn't say a lot, like in a selective few cases, I realized that with some of the immersive learning projects, even though the focus was on student learning, sometimes the students were able to learn about like how to be involved with the community partners. Maybe the professors benefited from that experience of being involved in a community immersive learning project. But I also realized that some of the community partners were not getting what they had expected from the immersive learning. So the expectations were different. Like students were able to learn a little bit. Faculty were able to put that in their CV and talk about immersive learning involvement. But some of the immersive learning projects didn't produce a successful result. And that to me felt like it was somehow not fair to the community members that were involved. So even though this wasn't continued as an immersive learning project, one thing that we have very intentionally decided was like that anytime we were working with community partners, we wanted to make sure that like we were at least delivering the product or service or like whatever we had agreed upon, even though even if that meant taking like two extra semesters.
Okay, we probably have time for one more question if anyone wants to get one more question in.
I have a question. I'm turning on my video. This is Dagny. I'm just wondering, is this run as part of a class or is it an extracurricular activity or some other mechanism for the students?
It's a class. It's actually a class. So I didn't talk much about my background. I have worked in advertising in India, and then I had my own business when I came. After I finished my grad school, I had my own business. Ball State is my first full-time teaching job. I've been here. I'm starting my 9th year, but because of my background in the industry, when I joined Ball State, one of the discussions with my then director was to start a course that works as a design studio, where the students, like, because our students, like in a lot of our programs, go for internships in the industry. But what if there was a class that provided the same opportunity while they were here? So it is a class in the School of Art. For the most part, we've had students from the design program, graphic design program, but we have also had students from animation program and in the art education program. We are like, the class is open to all the students within School of Art. I have considered opening it up to other students. I think that's where the problem is. Like, I mean, the share, like loading and all of that, like that's when it gets tricky. But it is a class. It's a class in School of Art.
Hey, well, thank you, Shantanu. That was great. All the design work was really nice. I loved it. Especially the Miniaturista one. I didn't realize like the leaf, like looking at it now, it's obvious like that's a leaf and that's a heron and that's the river, but it was really cool how you brought it all together. The students brought it all together. So thank you once again for sharing with us today.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yes,
really appreciate it.
Of course. And just as a reminder, this meeting will be uploaded to the YouTube channel of University Libraries, so feel free to relive the fun, and share with whoever. Yeah, so have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending.
And be on the lookout. This is every third Wednesday, so we've got more good content coming your way.
Sorry, third Thursday of every month.
Third Thursday, yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Bye-bye, everyone.